There's a moment in growth where nothing looks different on the outside, but everything is shifting underneath. You're not who you used to be, but you don't fully feel like who you're becoming either. And that space, that in between, that's where most people get uncomfortable because it doesn't feel like progress. It feels like uncertainty. It feels like quiet. It feels like, is this even working? But what if that stretch isn't confusion? What if it's construction? And what if the reason you don't feel different yet isn't because nothing is happening, but because something deeper is stabilizing? Look, transformation doesn't happen in a moment. It happens in restructuring, a change in form, a change in nature, a change in function. And restructuring has a phase where the old structure is gone, but the new one isn't fully reinforced yet. That phase has a name. It's called the bridge. The bridge between cause and effect, the bridge between survival and sovereignty, the bridge between this season 2 and next season 3. And here's what's powerful. Most people don't quit because they're incapable. They quit because the bridge feels like nowhere. But it's not nowhere. It's momentum without applause, growth without evidence, identity before results. Today, we're not talking about getting better. We're talking about becoming different. And if you've felt stretched lately, good. You're not behind. You're crossing. So let's talk about that bridge. Are you ready? I am. I'm Jonah. I'm your person. Let's get to it. Welcome back to the show. There's something almost disorienting about outgrowing yourself. You don't wake up one day and say, I am officially a new identity now. It doesn't work like that. It's subtler. You start noticing that your old reactions don't fit anymore. Old conversations feel smaller. Old environments feel tighter. And yet, you don't fully feel like the person you're becoming either. That space, that's the identity gap. It's the distance between who you were operating as and who you've decided to become. Not who you hope to become, who you've decided to become. There's a difference. Because once you decide, using that power of choice, the internal shift begins immediately. But the external world, it takes a minute to catch up. Your old habits are adjusting. Your standards are rising. Your tolerance is shrinking. But your results might look the same. Your relationships might treat you the same. Your environment might still respond to the old version of you. And that can make you question everything. Did I really change? Am I just imagining growth? Why doesn't it feel any different? Because identity stabilizes slower than decision. You can decide in a moment, but embodiment, that takes repetition, consistency, and even pressure. And here's the part no one talks about. The identity gap can feel like regression when it's actually reconstruction. You're not going backwards. You're shedding skin whilst growing new structure. And that in-between stage, it's uncomfortable because you can't perform the old version of you anymore. But you're not effortless at the new version yet either. That tension, that's not failure. That's the bridge. All right, let's talk about cause and effect here in part 2. It's similar to episode 6 here in season 2 called Cause and Effect. As a matter of fact, that's where it gets its roots. And I highly recommend you listen to that episode. Now, here's where things get interesting. Most people think that growth is immediate. You make a decision and you expect a result. You change your mindset and you expect your life to change with it. You raise your standards and you expect the world to respond differently. And that makes sense. But that's not how reality works. There's always a lag. Cause happens first. Effect comes later. And the space in between, once again, that's the bridge. If you plant a seed tonight, you don't dig it up tomorrow morning asking why it hasn't become a tree. But when it comes to identity, we do that all the time. I started thinking differently this week. Why don't I feel confident yet? I've been more disciplined for a month. Why hasn't anything shifted? I stopped tolerating certain behavior. Why is nothing improving? Because the cause has been planted, but the effect hasn't matured. And here's the part that really matters. When you don't understand the lag, you misinterpret the silence. You think nothing is happening. But beneath the surface, your nervous system is recalibrating. Your habits are reorganizing. Your standards are solidifying. And your tolerance, it's resetting. That's structural. That's transformation. Not loud, not flashy, but real. The bridge between cause and effect is quiet. There's no applause there, no external confirmation, just repetition, and just showing up again. Just reinforcing the decision you already made. And this is where most people turn around. Not because they're incapable, but because they mistook the lag for failure. If you're in that space right now, nothing is wrong. You're not stuck. You're in the stretch where cause is working, even if effect doesn't show up yet. And if you stay consistent long enough, effect always has the answers. That's not motivation. That's physics. Now here's challenge number 1. This week, stop measuring the outcome. Only measure whether you're reinforcing the cause. If you decided to change, don't check for proof. Check for consistency. That's it. Let's talk about the loneliness of growth here in part 3. There's another part of the bridge people don't talk about. It can feel lonely, not because you're alone, but because you're evolving. And evolution changes your reference points. Conversations that used to be engaging and energizing, they don't land the same anymore. Reactions that used to feel automatic now feel misaligned. Places that once felt comfortable start to feel tight. And here's what's confusing. The people around you may not see the shift yet. They're still interacting with the version of you they've always known. Whilst internally you're reorganizing, you're thinking differently, you're pausing differently, and you're choosing differently. But it's quiet. And quiet growth can feel invisible. You start wondering, why does this feel so isolating? It's not isolation, though. It's transition. You're not disconnecting from people. You're disconnecting from old patterns. And patterns that don't leave loudly. They just stop fitting. There's a stretch on the bridge where you can't fully relate to who you used to be, but you haven't quite found your rhythm yet. That space can be confusing. But that middle space we've been talking about, it can also feel like you're walking alone. But you're not alone. You're just early. Early in your standards. Early in your awareness. Early in your reconstruction. And early always means or feels that it's quieter than the established. Loud noise and all the things that come along with that. The loneliness is growth. It isn't that sign that you're off track. It's often a sign that you're actually ahead of your previous environment. And that doesn't make you feel better, I'm sure. It makes you feel at least responsible. Responsible for stabilizing before you seek validation. And if you can sit in that quiet stretch and keep your staying power without shrinking back to your old rooms, your old patterns, you don't just cross the bridge. You become someone who can build one. Let's talk about survival versus sovereign here in part 4. There's a deeper shift happening on that bridge. It's not just identity. It's posture. Most of us learn to operate in survival mode, not dramatic survival, subtle survival. Being able to read the room, managing perception, avoiding conflict, keeping the peace, reacting quickly, and protecting ourselves. It's adaptive. It's intelligent. It kept you safe at some point, but survival is still reactive. Sovereign is responsive. Let me simplify that. Survival asks, what do I need to do so this doesn't go wrong? Sovereign asks, who do I need to choose to be here? Survival waits for permission. Sovereign moves with ownership. Survival scans for threat. Sovereign scans for alignment. Sovereign doesn't mean dominant. It doesn't mean detached. And it doesn't mean above anyone. It means self-governing. It means your reactions are chosen, not automatic. It means your standards aren't dictated by the room. It means you can sit in discomfort without abandoning yourself. And here's why this matters on the bridge. When you're in the identity gap, when cause hasn't produced visible effect yet, when growth feels lonely, survival wants to go back to what's familiar, back to what's validated, and back to what's easier. Sovereign says, no, I decided. Now that's agency. It's not loud. It's not aggressive. Just steady ownership of your direction. The bridge is where survival patterns get exposed and sovereignty gets built. Not announced, built. You don't become sovereign because everything around you stabilizes. You become sovereign because you do. And here's your second challenge. This week, notice one moment where you normally react. And instead of asking, how do I protect myself here? Ask, who do I choose to be here right now? One moment, one shift, and that's how sovereignty is built. Here's something that doesn't get celebrated enough. The invisible work. The work no one sees. Let's talk about that here in part 5. So many of us do not celebrate the wins, not the milestones, not the announcements, or the internal adjustments, the conversations you chose not to escalate, or the reaction you swallowed and reconstructed, or the standard you quietly held, or the boundary you reinforced without broadcasting it. That's the invisible work. And most transformation lives there. We're conditioned to measure progress by visibility. Did it grow? Did it scale? Did it change publicly? Did people notice? But structural change happens long before public evidence appears. A building is reinforced before it's expanded. Roots grow before branches stretch. Identity stabilizes before results multiply. And here's where people get discouraged. They're doing the invisible work, but because no one applauds it, they assume it doesn't count. It counts more than you think, because invisible work changes your form. It changes your nature. It changes your function. You don't argue the same. You don't tolerate the same. And you don't collapse the same. That's not small. That's structural. The bridge is mostly invisible. It's repetition without recognition, consistency without validation, standards without audience. But when the visible shift finally happens, it's built on months, sometimes years, of invisible reinforcement. If you're in that season where it feels quiet, good. Quiet doesn't mean stagnant. Quiet often means strengthening. And strengthening isn't glamorous, but it's powerful. You don't cross the bridge because people see your growth. You cross it because you kept doing the work when no one did. Here in part 6, we're going to talk about the transition from season 2 to season 3. Throughout the past year, I received a lot of messages from around the planet, from people in Copenhagen and England and Australia, here in the United States. And one of the biggest themes, or one of my biggest takeaways, was that there were so many episodes that helped to transform people's way of thinking and how they approached conflict or how they approached relationships. Well, this is no different. And I wanted to kind of spell that out here in part 6 about how season 2 connects with season 3. So let's do that. Every season of your life has a theme. It's kind of like the episodes that flowed throughout this entire year. 52 episodes. Sometimes you don't realize it until you're leaving it. Season 2, for a lot of people, was about awareness. They started seeing patterns. They started seeing and questioning defaults. They started realizing that you don't operate the same way anymore. It was disruptive. It was stretching. And it was humbling. Season 2 is where you wake up. But Season 3 is about embodiment. Not talking about it, but living it. Not identifying the pattern, but interrupting it. Not saying you value discipline, but becoming disciplined. Not saying you're evolving, but operating differently. Season 2 is insight, and Season 3 is integration. And the bridge? The bridge is what makes that shift real. But because without that bridge, awareness just stays intellectual. There's no action behind it. With the bridge, it becomes structural, reinforcement, reconstruction. This is why the invisible work matters. This is why the cause and effect lag matters. And this is why sovereignty matters. You don't arrive in a new season because the calendar flipped or you turned the page. You arrive because your form changed. Your nature changed. Your function changed. And if you've been doing the work quietly, if you've been reinforcing the cause, if you've been choosing sovereignty in small moments, you're not trying to enter Season 3. You're already stepping into it. Not loudly, but unmistakably. And that's powerful because Season 3 doesn't need applause. It produces it. Here's your third and final challenge for this episode. Take 5 minutes this week. Only 5, like legit 5 minutes. Name the season you're leaving. Then, name the one you're stepping into. Don't explain it to anyone. Just decide. Then pause. Because seasons don't change when you feel ready. They change when you choose differently. Here's the truth about the bridge. Most people don't fall off of it. They turn around. Let's talk about that here in part 7. They don't fail. They retreat. Not because they weren't capable, but because the middle feels uncertain. And uncertainty messes with the ego. It's easier to go back to what's familiar than to stay in what isn't validated yet. On the bridge, you don't get immediate feedback, and you don't get applause, and you don't always get clarity. You just get repetition. And repetition without recognition can feel pointless. So people go back to their old reactions, back to old environments, back to unhealthy habits or old standards, not because they don't want growth. Okay, I want to make sure that I'm clear on that, but because survival feels safer than sovereignty. And here's the subtle danger. When you turn around on the bridge, you don't go back into who you were. You go back knowing you left. That awareness lingers. That dissonance stays. Because once you've seen the next level, you can't fully unsee it. So the real tension isn't failure, it's this. Can you tolerate the stretch? And can you tolerate it longer than the discomfort lasts? Can you sit in the lag without demanding immediate proof? Can you keep reinforcing the cause before the effect arrives? The people who cross the bridge, they're not the loudest. And also, they're not the most talented. But they are the ones who stayed. They stayed consistent. They stayed aware. They stayed sovereign. And they stayed in the invisible work. And eventually, the bridge ends. Not with fireworks, but with arrival. And when you arrive, you realize something powerful. You weren't stuck. You were becoming. Maybe that's what this whole season has been about. A bridge. Not a highlight reel, not a performance, a restructuring. Quiet decisions, invisible work, moments where you chose differently. even when no one noticed. You sat in your car, listening to this podcast week over week, hoping that something could change. And it did. Because, as some would say, hope isn't a strategy. And you used your power to choose and decide and commit that you were going to make a difference in your life and the lives of others. If you felt stretched, if you felt slightly out of place, if you've questioned whether anything is actually shifting, it is. It stabilizes first, though. And stabilization, as I mentioned, is quiet. You don't wake up one day and feel like a new person. You wake up and realize you no longer react the same. You no longer tolerate the same. You no longer think the same. That's not improvement. That's structural change. And that's something you must celebrate. The bridge was never meant to be punishment. It was preparation. Preparation for a version of you that doesn't need external proof to keep moving. Preparation for leadership that isn't reactive. Preparation for a season that doesn't require survival mode. And if you're still on that bridge, good. Stay. Don't rush it. Don't romanticize it. Just reinforce that what you've already decided must stay. Because on the other side of the bridge, it isn't a different life. It's a different way of operating inside the same life. And that changes everything. We're not finished. We're crossing. And the next episode, we'll look back and say it clearly. We made it. We did it. But tonight, honor the bridge. Join me next week for the show finale. We did it. We made it. And until then, have a great week.